Today, I have something a little bit different for all of you. Hopefully, you'll enjoy it. I'm going to be reading some of the reviews that my most recent series, Dreamer's Throne, has gotten on Amazon and on Goodreads, and we're going to be talking about them. You know, on this channel, I talk a lot about constantly learning and constantly asking that oh so important question, what is one thing I can do better? And so typically after a new book has been out for about a week, I like to look through the reviews, and this is honestly pretty much the only time I ever do this. But I do it specifically so that I can understand how my book is being received. Now, this isn't the end-all be-all, and I have some negative reviews, and I have some mediocre reviews, and I have some positive reviews. And we're going to be looking at all of them. I'm going to be walking you through what it says, the way I think about it, and how I use it to better my craft. For anybody who's new to the channel, my name is Seth. I'm a full-time fantasy author. I've written 25 books, published most of them, and I make these videos because there are a lot of authors out there who just aren't making it, and I don't want you to be one of them. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so I have some reviews, and we are going to be starting with the negative reviews that I got. Now, something weird happened with this book. Amazon is constantly changing things in their algorithm, and it seems like they've been suppressing a lot of the reviews. So what that means is that instead of just letting anybody review, they've been more selective about who they're allowing to leave reviews on books. And this is both positive and negative because on the one hand, it decreases the total volume of reviews, but on the other hand, it tends to weed out malicious reviews that are just being left to harm a book. And so Amazon is doing its best to balance its system, and we are sort of at Amazon's mercy. But I did end up with a 2-star review. In fact, it was one of the first written reviews that I got. And I think it's always worth taking a look at our negative reviews first and then moving up to our positive reviews. Partly that's just because it protects us against ending with sort of the negative in mind, because it can be really easy to read a negative review and then fixate on it. But we're going to read the negative review, figure out what we can learn from it, and move along. So let's do that. So 2 out of 5 stars. It was titled Slow and Not an Interesting Read. I've liked Seth Ring's books, but this one is slow to start and end to a fun read. I think that's supposed to say not a fun read. Skip it. Well, if that is not a succinct description of what this reader thinks about my book, I don't know what is. Clearly, this reader didn't like the book. Now, they softened the blow slightly by saying they've liked my books in the past, but this one is slow and not a fun read. So, what can I learn? Clearly, this reader thought there was something different about the pacing of this book as compared to other books. But we don't simply take one person's feedback and base anything on it. We collect a variety of data from a bunch of different sources, and then we make our judgments. So let's actually start reading our moderate reviews, because of all of the written reviews I got, this was the only 2-star or less review. Let's move on to the 3s. So these are the mid reviews. 3 stars is sort of middle of the road. It typically means they liked it enough to finish it, but not necessarily enough that they're going to continue with the series. You know, maybe at some point I should talk about how review systems work, because they work differently on different platforms. On Amazon, the 1 through 5 stars means something different than on, let's say, Goodreads. But for now, we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to treat them sort of all the same. So let's see what our 3-star reviews said. So the first one, I like that the main character, Garrett, is quite different from many other RPG lit I have read. Sometimes it is a little repetitive when they all turn out to be physically superior to all. Not sure if I really liked him or cared for him, though. An aloof, calm character is probably the type I relate to the least. Now, I just have to pause here and say, this reviewer nailed Garrett's character. He is aloof. He is very calm in a lot of difficult situations. And so it makes sense that if this reviewer doesn't resonate with that kind of character, then they're not necessarily going to like it. Let's continue. I sometimes felt a little lost, like some vital information was missing, besides the usual mystery of their life on Earth, transfer to the new world, and previous history, but settled in to read the adventure. I would have liked more world and character building. Not sure if I will read on in this series. So this is a fantastic review. This is actually the kind of review that we really want as we're trying to go through this process of improving our own writing. They didn't really resonate with the character, but they still settled in to read the adventure. They sometimes felt like vital information was missing. Now, obviously, there's mystery involved in this series, but they're speaking to that mystery maybe being a little bit too much, not quite enough revealed. And they even speak about that later when they say that they want more world building and character building. So clearly, they were expecting more information than they got. And sitting in the mystery is something that they didn't really appreciate. Now, they didn't rule out continuing the series completely, but it sounds from their review like they're probably not going to be waiting with bated breath for book number 2. So far we have a couple of complaints. The first complaint is that it's slow. The second complaint is that there's not quite enough information. There isn't enough world building. There isn't enough character building. So let's keep those things in mind and let's move on to the next one. I don't know what to say about this one. There were times when I thought it could be better in relation to the characters, like their development felt stifled by the progressing of and focus of Garrett's powers. Again, there's that same thing, right? Character development feels a little bit lacking. And like, were people this dumb that they did not caught on that everything changed when he came along? Maybe we'll see more in the other books, but here it felt shallow, and if I'm not invested in them, I don't much care for the plot. The character development seems to be the main sticking point here. But they continue. So much so that the last part of the book bored me to no end, and even if I did like the concept around the story, it just felt lacking, but good enough that I want to read the other books in this series. Now, I have to admit, the first time I read this review, I was honestly a little bit confused, because clearly they don't like the character development particularly, and they don't feel like they can invest in the plot because it's a little bit too shallow. And the end of the book really bored them. Then why are they wanting to read more in the series? And see, this is why it's really important to dig into the reviews you get, specifically so that you can improve. Because clearly there's something about it that they liked enough that they are going to continue reading. But there's also something that's lacking. And I think that we are slowly narrowing in on what it is. If the last part of the book bored them, then it's possible there was an issue with the pacing, which is what the first reviewer said. So we've reinforced this suspicion that there's something wrong with the pacing of the book. It's too slow, and that the character development needed to be stronger. Now, we have one more 3-star review. Let's see what they say. This one is somewhat unique in that most of the lit RPG elements take place in a dream state. I've seen similar things before, but none that were intermixed with standard story elements. If you like pure lit RPG stats and skills, you're likely to be disappointed, though there is some of that here. The large majority of the story is centered around the dreamscape and the main character controlling or learning to control the planted seeds inserted into other people. It's an interesting concept, and while it doesn't really interest me all that much, it does provide a unique perspective on things, which is enough to keep me reading. It's different, but I'm not sure that it's my kind of thing. I'll likely read the next book in the series too, just to see where it's going, then determine if it's suited for me or not. Once again, we have a reader who knows what they like and is still on the fence. And so this is good in that they're going to read the next book. It wasn't so much of a turnoff that they're just saying, no, I'm done with it. But again, clearly pointing out that there are some issues. Now, in this case, the issue is identified as being sort of a uninteresting trope, something that the reader themselves doesn't like. And so we can take this one and say, okay, this is a reader who knows what they like, and this book isn't quite it. But I didn't just get 2-star and 3-star reviews. I got some 4 and 5-star reviews as well. And so let's read those and see if they counterbalance or if they reinforce the suspicions about the book that we already have. And again, the reason we're doing this is because we want to understand how to improve the next book. And how do we do that? Well, we find out what people have said about it, and we make our adjustments. So let's take a look at our 4 and 5 star reviews. Our first, 5 out of 5 stars, new take on Weak to Strong. This is an exciting start to a new series. The system is unlike anything I've read before. The characters are interesting and varied, and the worlds are waiting to be explored. Can't wait for the next one. Okay, so this is curious to me because here's someone who said that the characters are interesting and varied. So clearly they don't agree with opinions that we've already established. Additionally, they say it's an exciting start to the series. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that the pacing is exciting. It just means that they are excited to be reading it. So now we have a counterpoint to the data that we've already collected. Let's look at our next one. This is 4 out of 5 stars. Watch your XP, please. I like everything that Seth Ring writes, and this new book is no different. One small concern, however, your XP totals bounced around above and below 10 for most of this book. I found it to be very frustrating. Okay, so that's fascinating to me because that's an issue with the system that I chose for the book. I think that's a fairly valid criticism because most people who are reading in my genre really want progression. So I can understand that being the issue. Clearly, though, here's somebody who has read my other books and also enjoys this one. Again, sort of a counterpoint to the previous data that we've collected, that the book is slow and the characters need better development. Now, what's fascinating is that we have multiple people who have read my books before coming to this new series, and some of them like it and some of them don't. All right, let's keep going. 5 out of 5 stars, amazing book by an amazing author. Well, thank you. This series is going to be very different from Battle Mage Farmer, but the story and characters are just as vivid. Although this is a lot less funny and a lot more gruesome. In any case, great book, wonderful mixture of lit RPG and horror. Can't wait for the sequel. Once again, somebody who's read the books and somebody who doesn't agree that the characters are underdeveloped or flat. They do correctly point out that it's very different from Battle Mage Farmer. It's not supposed to be funny, and that the story is a little bit darker. And that's all accurate. And then we have one last 5-star review. Good book, well worth the time. Good story without being predictable. The MC is interesting and develops, but doesn't move outside of character. The secondary characters are strong and manage to stay in their lanes. Overall, a strong, fresh take on lit RPG. Okay, so these are the reviews that we've gotten, and I find this fascinating. You see, we've collected a bunch of data from people who didn't really like the book, people who were sort of on the fence about the book, and people who did like the book. And the opinions that were formed early from the 2 and 3-star reviews that the characters need better development and that the story is a little bit slow or dull isn't at all echoed in the later reviews. So what's going on? Well, what's going on is that not everybody likes the same kind of books. And that's just the truth of it. I wrote Battle Mage Farmer, and that's one kind of book. And I wrote the Titan series, and that's another kind of book. And then I wrote Dreamer's Throne, and here we have a completely different kind of book. And it's okay that not everybody loves all of them. This exercise that I go through of reading through my reviews and checking to see if there are major unified themes running throughout helps me write a better next book. Now, I will say that it's important, if you want to do this, to be able to separate yourself from your art. You really have to be able to read a review like that first one, where the reviewer seriously recommends for people to just skip the book, and you have to be able to separate that from yourself. I have to be able to read that review and say, okay, let me take what they're saying, let me take the truth from what they're saying, which is that they didn't prefer the book, and that they thought the characters were dull, and that they thought the story was slow. And let me take that piece of information without attaching it to my self-worth, and let me understand it in the broader context of what other people say. Now, again, we did find some unifying themes running through our bad reviews, but they were also balanced by our good reviews. So the important thing to do is to weigh them out and come to a conclusion based on what we know. At the time of recording this, Dreamer's Throne has a 4.6 out of 5 stars on Amazon, which tells us that there are a lot more positive reviews than there are negative reviews. A lot more. And so when I'm weighing the feedback that I'm getting from reviews, I need to take it seriously. I need to understand the truth that is in it. I need to be ruthlessly honest about what people are saying. But I also need to keep it in perspective. The reality is that more people like it than dislike it. And so as I weigh out the feedback that I'm getting, I know that while I didn't write a book that's for everybody, I did write a book that has a strong audience. And I can take comfort in that. Now, when I go to write my next book, am I going to pay attention to the pacing? Absolutely. Am I going to pay attention to my character development? Undoubtedly. Because I'm able to take the feedback that I'm getting and I'm able to apply it to write a better next book. But I'm curious to know what you think. Have you read Dreamer's Throne? If you have, leave me a comment down below letting me know what you thought. And if you didn't like it, that's totally okay. I'd love to know what you didn't like about it so that I can write a better next book.